Welcome to Good Thinking. Welcome, good thinkers from all around the world who are gathering each week to take a little time away to set aside all the time we're told what to think. You go on Twitter, this is what you should think. This is the right way to think. So that we can devote a little bit of time to thinking about our thinking for improving how to think. So those of you who are regular good thinkers, you know the drill. Let us know who you are and where you're from. And if you're new to good thinking, this is the drill. Let us know who you are and where you're from. And this is a show. This isn't a lecture. This is a community. This is a community of good thinkers. So we are here to engage in a conversation. I'm just here to facilitate that conversation. But the cool thing about it is when everyone is engaging and bringing their different viewpoints, because they're from all over the world, the good thinkers are from all over the world, and then bringing their own perspectives, because the difference between groups of people are much, much, much different than differences between individual people. So you can never let an individual stand in for the whole group. And that's the beauty of good thinking. So I'm going to welcome some people on the show. Abdurrashid, welcome. Hey, and coming in from YouTube. So we've got people streaming in from YouTube Live and from LinkedIn Live. Barkley from DC, Michael from Toronto, Adam from, he says he has to catch this on replay. Oh, because I love when Adam can weigh in. Well, you can weigh in later. Even if you're catching this on replay, weigh in later with your comments. This is an ongoing conversation. So welcome, Stephen from Soccer City, USA. Go Timbers, go Thorns. Claudine, welcome from San Jose, California, our neighbors to the south. So this is an opportunity to bring the conversation about something that is outside of my field of expertise, but I want to apply. It's outside my field of expertise in that people do some of this kind of stuff for a living, but my field of expertise touches on this because decision-making, judgment decision-making, critical thinking touches on everything. So we're going to talk about maximizing the benefits of diversity, even though, I'm not a diversity expert. I don't coach in diversity. So we coach and train companies on decision-making and judgment and critical thinking, which touches on everything. So we're going to kind of take a twist on looking at diversity in a new way. So welcome. Let's see. I'm going to welcome some more people onto the show. Amanda from Michigan. And we've got Nicole from Frankfurt, Germany. And Muteb from Saudi Arabia. So this is a great thing because we've got different viewpoints. How many of you coming from Saudi Arabia, coming from Frankfurt, coming from Michigan, coming from Daniel from Ethiopia, okay? How many of you think that your viewpoint from where you come represents the perspective of everyone you know that comes from there? Yes? No? Is that clear? Meaning, because I come from Soccer City, USA, Portland, Oregon, do I share, that's my viewpoint, do I share the same perspective? Can I represent the perspective of Portland, Oregon? So that's the question. And this is a great thing because you're coming from all over. So if Muteb says something like, I'm from Saudi Arabia and I think this, should I think, oh, that's what people in Saudi Arabia think? Or should I think that's what Muteb thinks? That's my question. Aha, of course, Abdurrashid, always a good thinker. False consensus bias, the feeling that more people think and agree with the way I'm thinking. And one of the challenges with false consensus bias touches directly on diversity. Because if your group of friends, the people with whom you interact are all like-minded, are you more or less susceptible to false consensus bias? So Michael says not a chance, and Amanda says, of course not. Of course not. And yet so often we think that one person standing in or one anecdotal contact represents the diversity of everyone from that identity group. Okay, so that's going to touch on that. Hi from South Carolina, Edwin from South Carolina. Perfect. All right. How many of you have ever felt that you're different, that no one quite understands you, like you're not really like anyone else? How many of you have felt that? And there's situations where you felt that. I've been at a party where you feel like, okay, I'm not like everyone here. But I think, how many of you have felt that? I'll say myself. What does it mean to be different? Is it something that someone can identify for you? Or is it something that you feel within yourself? So Abdurrachid says, I believe in uniqueness, but I struggle with people that don't. Okay. Interesting. What does it mean to struggle with people that don't? Okay. So Dr. Zavid says, yes. Michael says, not different, unique. What's the difference? Is there a difference between different and unique? Unique is one of a kind, right? And then some people say, well, I'm going to give a variation. So I'm not going to be so dogmatic about what it means to be unique. You can be kind of unique or very unique. Can you be kind of unique or very unique? Or does unique just mean one of a kind? Can you be very one of a kind? So we have choices you make are different. All right. So I'm not talking about intellectual. So now we're talking, let's get out of our heads for a second. Move the feeling, the understanding of what it means, the semantics, the words, the intellectualizing of what it means to be different, and bring it into your body. Have you ever felt that no one is quite like you? In other words, to the point where maybe it's comfortable or maybe it's uncomfortable. Where do you feel it in your body? I'm going to move the banner so we have more room for our comments, because the comments are what make it so good. All right. I'm talking about how you feel. Do you think that some differences matter more than others? Do you think that some differences matter more than others? What makes these differences matter more than others? If you think yes, what makes these differences matter more than others? Should some differences matter more than others? And how should we think about this? How can we think about this? And finally, the best question, I think, how could we think about this? How do we think about differences and whether they matter, could matter, or should matter? Okay, so we have got, Fahid says, idea checking. And nice to meet everyone. Nice to meet you, Fahad, who says idea checking. Nice to meet all of the good thinkers. And this is the community. So welcome to the community. All the regular good thinkers, we're welcoming the new good thinkers. Abdul Rashid says, what makes it matter is contribution, bringing something different, especially when it comes to perspectives. Okay, rubber chicken for that, because I think you've hinted at something that we're going to get into. There's going to be, when ideas come to mind about when you imagine diversity, what ideas come to mind and what images come to mind? Is it different? When you imagine diversity, what ideas come to mind and what images come to mind? All right. So just think about that. Like, I have this picture in my mind. I always think about the people who have that disease where they can't picture things. That there's also something where people can't feel things. They can intellectualize things, but they can't feel things. And that maybe it's a coping mechanism. They don't want to feel things. But in this case, let's just think intellectually and think in your body. When you think about diversity, what images come to mind and what feelings come to mind? Okay, so Jennifer says collaborative learning and do no harm comes to mind. Okay, but really, what are you picturing? What does that mean? That's in your head. That's in your head. That's great, and I love it. But if you had some truth serum, what ideas are popping into your mind? Okay, so Amanda says, yes, but I try to focus more on the similarities than the differences, because at the end of the day, we're all human. I agree, knowing that your contributions matter is vital. Okay, excellent, excellent. All right, so there's going to be two different concepts I want to talk about today and see what you guys think about them. And within each concept, there are two different definitions. Okay, so we're going to set aside maybe all the things you think about or have thought about when it comes to diversity for a second. And then I want to kind of throw out, see what you think about these two things. All right. So we're going to get into it. We're going to think about a couple of different things. One, I want to think about viewpoint diversity versus perspective diversity. And I think it's helpful to think about them separately. So we're going to get into that. And then I want to think about settled problems versus wicked problems. And by wicked problems, I don't mean evil problems. I mean complex problems where a solution might create more problems than the initial problem to begin with, versus settled problems where the problem is settled. The earth is not flat. It's a settled problem. Do you need different viewpoints around settled problems, or do you need different viewpoints around wicked problems? Do you need different perspectives around settled problems, or do you need different perspectives around wicked problems? That's the first question. Then we'll get into it. All right, let's get back to your comments, how you imagine diversity. All right. Let's see. Abdurrashid says, the image that comes to mind when it came to diversity is multiple roads. Okay, so you see, interesting. All right, multiple roads. Maybe coming to a point, or maybe emerging. Is it multiple roads coming to a point, or is it a point coming to multiple roads? Let's see. We've got Jennifer, collaborative learning and do no harm comes to mind. Okay, what's the image for that? How do you feel it in your body? And what are you seeing or hearing or tasting or smelling? What's the sense that we use most when we think about diversity? I'm throwing a lot of questions. All right. Amanda says, yes, but I try to focus more on the similarities. Okay, we've got, let's say, sorry, I'm bringing some of these comments in. Okay, so Zaved says, European and African people come to mind when he thinks about diversity. And I think that's really good, because that's like just an honest image. They're all honest images, but it's an honest, simple image. And I think rubber chickens for all of the people who have taken a stab at this. And we've got Claudine's. We're going to bring Claudine's comment in. When I think about diversity, I automatically think of physical characteristics, and then I feel somewhat fearful about being different. Absolutely. I think a lot of people, when they have a visual in their mind, they think about visual differences. I mean, it's they think they can see diversity or taste diversity or hear diversity or smell diversity. But Jennifer says the function behind the behavior, oh, that's an interesting. I'm not clear, but I think it might highlight something intriguing. You can elaborate. All right. So diversity is usually thought to mean a range of people with various racial and ethnic and socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds and various lifestyles, experiences, and interests. When you think about diversity, that's kind of what we're thinking about, and having a variety of individuals and points of view to represent in a particular context. Okay? So diversity is a group of people who are different in the same place. Is that a working definition? Diversity is a group of people who are different in the same place. And we're talking about people diversity. You might be talking about, biological diversity, where you need different kinds. It's not just people, you need different animals. We're going to simplify. We're talking about human diversity. Although one could argue that that's very limiting. That's what we're going to put the guardrails around that. Human diversity. All right. So we've said, okay, let's see what we have here. We've got, Amanda says, sight is the sense I believe we use. I agree. As a parent of a different learner, I can tell you that many people assume you can see differences, but I know that there are so many invisible differences that impact our lives. Yes. And then let's see what we've got here. Intellectual diversity is second to the physical one. Intellectual diversity. Interesting. I think we've got some good ones here. All right. So can we agree that diversity is a group of people who are different in the same place? Because if they're different in different places, then we could all just be, you're different here, you're different here, you're different here, but we don't interact. So the planet, you could say we're in the same place in the planet. You could look at diversity. So it really has to do with place or context. You have to consider context. All right. Actually, what do you think? Is place or context necessary for assessing or considering diversity? What about diversity in the workplace? Well, you're talking about in that context. Diversity in the workplace refers to an organization that intentionally employs a workforce comprised of individuals, usually with different characteristics: gender, race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, education, maybe age, diversity of age. So that's kind of, we talk about different people in the same place. All right. So another definition of diversity from the School of Education in American University highlights viewpoint diversity and suggests that diversity improves cognitive skills and critical thinking by presenting students with viewpoints far different from their own, allowing them to think critically about their own beliefs and examine the world in fresh ways. But I'm going to give you kind of a different way of thinking about it so that we can think about our thinking. All right, here we go. Think about viewpoint diversity. Can you see viewpoint? Yes or no? Can you hear viewpoint? And or can you taste or smell viewpoint? What about perspective? What's the difference between perspective and viewpoint? Anyone want to take a stab at it? All right, so let's bring in some comments. Jennifer says there are 4 functions behind all behavior: sensory, like a scratch you itch; attention seeking, avoidance and escape; and then tangible, meaning access to something. Okay, perfect, excellent, excellent, excellent. Context always matters and aids in understanding. All right, excellent, good point. But my question now is, let's try this one. First of all, is there a difference between viewpoint and perspective? Does anyone want to take a stab at it? I think there is, so I'm going to give you what I think. What do you think? And if so, what is the difference? Now, in diversity, you can say it doesn't matter or it does matter. It depends on the problem you're trying to solve. Remember, we talked about settled problems versus wicked problems. Settled problems are problems we all agree that this is settled information, versus wicked things where it's more complex. We don't all necessarily agree. All right, so we got those, and then we've got viewpoint versus perspective. And I know people use these interchangeably, but here's where it's kind of gets helpful. Barkley says, oh, good, we got some more weighing in. I think you can sometimes see viewpoint, but not usually perspective unless it's advertised, like with a bumper sticker. Ooh, hoo, hoo. Okay, I think that's great. Because here's the deal. You have all shared your viewpoint. I'm Becky from Portland, Oregon. Daniel might be from where? Daniel, where are you from? Are you from Frankfurt? I can't remember. When I think about diversity, what comes to mind is the different people from different cultures with different perception with the same thing. Okay, excellent. Excellent. When you share where you're from, I would argue that it's helpful to think that you are sharing your viewpoint. Because when it comes to diversity, viewpoint, you can think of viewpoint diversity as the differences in where we see from. Our life experiences, our work experiences, our backgrounds, and our cultures. Okay? That's from where we see our viewpoint. All right. So 2 people who grew up in my exact neighborhood, who went to my exact elementary school, all the way through to my high school, go out into the world and we say, hey, we're from Portland, Oregon. We went to high school in Portland, Oregon. We went to elementary school, and you go out in the world and I go out in the world and I represent that viewpoint. But what about our perspectives? What about our perspectives? Even though these terms are used interchangeably. And when you think about diversity of viewpoint, if you just get, oh, check, I got someone from Portland, Oregon, or I got a woman from Portland, Oregon, who's this middle-aged or middle-aged plus me woman from Portland, Oregon, and she's representing the viewpoints of all these people. Well, when you think about perspective diversity is different because it's the different ways we see things, different opinions, beliefs, and ways of looking at the world. So we may have the same viewpoint. You may be from Saudi Arabia. This person may be from Saudi Arabia. That person may be from Saudi Arabia. A human from Saudi Arabia, same viewpoint, different perspective. All right. So when you think of these differences, these types of differences are related and they influence each other, but they don't go together in the same way for different people. Like I said, 2 people born and raised in the same village can end up with very different perspectives, even if they attended the same college and earned the same degrees. The same viewpoints shape people's perspectives in different ways. So assuming that people who look and sound similar will bring the same perspectives to your decision team will leave you susceptible to being blindsided. And I said in the beginning, this is a difference between looking at the moral issue of diversity and inclusion and looking at the strategic issue of diversity and inclusion. From a strategic decision-making standpoint, it is very important to separate viewpoint, where you come from, that you might even hear, see, and smell similar, and your perspective, what you do with that information, because we are all different. So one person coming from Portland as a middle-aged woman cannot be the stand-in for all the perspectives that brings. So how do you do diversity? Okay, so Daniel says, why do most people fear diversity? Do most people fear diversity? Maybe there's some biological. I have a lot of people friends that work in the diversity space who really want to surround themselves with like-minded people to teach diversity in a particular way. I think it's ironic. Is it problematic? Maybe. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But when it comes to strategic decision making, I can tell you that if you see agreement, everyone agrees, it doesn't mean you've arrived at the right answer. But let's say you put all the different viewpoints in. You've got people that look this way and that way and come at it from this and these learning differences, and you've addressed diversity with all the boxes you can see or hear, and everyone agrees. Do you have the right answer? What else could it be? Anyone? All right. So we're going to say opinion is a personal belief and perspective is from another's view, or putting yourself in their shoes. Aha. Okay. So talking about empathy, touching on empathy, asking why you think versus what you think. Aha. Excellent. All right. Do people have access to why they think the way they do necessarily? How many of you watched Will Smith punch Chris Rock or slap Chris Rock during the Oscars last night? It's all over Twitter. Everyone has a strong opinion. Everyone has access to exactly what must have been going through Will Smith's mind at the time he got up and did that, and everything that must have been, assuming it wasn't staged, exactly what has gone through Chris Rock's mind. And people are saying you can't weigh in unless you're this, or you can't weigh in, or you can't understand unless you're a woman, or you're this, ethnic or racial group, or you've got a physical deformity, or you've got alopecia, or you can't weigh in. Okay, so you can't weigh in. All different viewpoints, all different perspectives. How do we know that Will Smith even has access to why he made that decision? We don't. We can only speculate. So that's why I say, that's why Jennifer's comment is interesting, because opinion is a personal belief. And we're getting afield a bit, but I think it comes down to really separating viewpoint from perspective diversity, and thinking about these things different. And then thinking about whether you're dealing with a settled problem or a wicked problem. Okay. One of the things that is very important when you're bringing diverse groups of people to perform a function is to be very clear on the purpose of that function. Clarity and purpose are two of the key things with regard to critical thinking, right? So if you're bringing a diverse group of people, and this is from a strategic decision-making standpoint, and you're thinking about diversity, you're thinking about what you can see, what you can smell, what you can hear. Maybe you're trying to check the box for HR. I'm not suggesting that that's a bad thing, by the way. I'm not using that as a flippant check the box. I'm saying you're trying to make sure that you covered all your bases. And you're trying to understand how we can make the best strategic decision, meaning a decision that is free of noise and bias as much as possible. And you bring this group of people in, and everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that the decision should be this. Is that the right decision? Well, when you have agreement, and this is in the world of strategic decision-making, noise and bias, when you have agreement, you might be having the right answer, but you might also all be agreeing in a biased way, statistical bias. So you might all have agreement because you've got this team, but you might all be agreeing on the wrong answer. That's statistical bias. Okay? You just don't know. You're shooting an arrow, you get the bullseye, and everyone hits the bullseye. And until you see what the right answer is, you don't know if everyone is agreeing over here, all agreeing on the wrong answer when the bullseye's here. It may look like the right answer. That's just statistical bias. And the reason I bring this up is that it's very easy to get a group of people who feel that diversity is being addressed because they're all thinking that diversity can be seen or smelled or heard, and they're not thinking about it in the context of what they're trying to achieve, making a strategic decision. Maybe it's morally important to have diversity. That could totally be. Inclusion, it could be a moral decision, totally legit. But if you're looking at a strategic decision, it is very clear that a diversity of perspectives that come from a diversity of viewpoints oftentimes, because they correlate, is very important for your strategic decision-making process when dealing with wicked problems. When dealing with settled problems, do you need diversity? Okay, let me give you an example because we're getting all over. I'm going to bring it in a little bit. It's a hairy topic. It's a wicked problem topic. Do you need diversity when dealing with wicked problems and settled problems? And I'll give you an example of a settled problem. The earth is not flat. It's a settled problem. So do you need a diversity of perspectives? Do you need to bring people who believe in flat earth to weigh in? There might be some benefit to understanding how they came to this decision. But do you need to bring them in when it's a settled problem? No, you don't. You probably don't. You need to bring them in when it's a wicked problem, like most problems that are complex and hairy, like climate change. Do you need to bring climate change deniers in when it's a settled problem that there is climate change? Depends on how their perspective. What are they? Maybe they're not denying that there's climate change. Maybe they're denying the degree that humans contribute to climate change. So then you think, okay, do you provide a topic, a platform for them to speak at your college campus? Well, here's the tricky part. Most problems are wicked problems until you identify and clarify what you're talking about, your purpose. And you can all agree that we're going to settle on this purpose. But if you get a diversity of perspectives and your purpose is to get a product to market in 10 months, I'm just saying, and you say, that's our purpose. We want a clarity of purpose. And we're all going to agree that this is a settled problem. We're going to do this in 10 months. But it's really a wicked problem because not everyone's agreeing to that. There's a difference. When you have a settled problem, it is then diversity of viewpoint and perspective doesn't matter as much, right? You don't need a diversity of opinion on genocide. It's a settled problem that genocide is bad. You don't need a diversity of perspectives and viewpoints. Okay. Now, Jennifer says, this is good. Religion is the biggest topic of diversity. Now, religion might be a settled problem for you. It may be a wicked problem for someone else, right? You might settle that this is the truth. It's a settled problem. In that case, you want to look at religion as a settled problem. You probably don't need a lot of or want a lot of diversity of perspectives to question that. Here is what I'm going to warn people against. You tell me what you think, because I could be wrong about this, right? I want to warn people against turning wicked problems into settled problems too soon. Making wicked problems into settled moral problems too soon. Because if you do that, then you think that diversity is your definition of diversity. People who think like you, people who think like you that that diversity looks like this, or sounds like this, or feels or tastes like this. And then you can think you're checking that box of diversity for settled problems when you're really dealing with wicked problems that require a broader range of perspectives that you might not be able to see, hear, or feel by checking a box. A little bit mushy. All right, so how do you do this? Well, don't slip wicked problems into settled problems too soon. Okay? These are complex problems. We're not going to replace morality for settlement. Like, we're not going to say, okay, this is a moral issue, therefore we can't think about how the solution might cause more problems because it's a wicked problem. So don't mush wicked problems into settled problems too soon. If you're going to create a settled problem, make sure that you articulate, this is our purpose. We have settled on this purpose. There can be other ways of looking at it, but we're going to agree to this is our purpose, and be clear about it. So you can exclude perspectives that aren't necessary for that settlement of that problem. All right. Now, if you are going to look at more things as wicked problems, do you need more or less diversity of perspective? What do you think? Do you need more diversity with wicked problems or less diversity with wicked problems? Do you need more diversity with settled problems or less diversity with settled problems? Anyone? Okay. You need more diversity with wicked problems, and most problems are more wicked than we like to think. So diversity is really good in that context, diversity of perspectives. But if you think that your diversity checklist is a settled problem for explaining diversity, then you might be replacing a wicked problem, this idea of how to think about diversity, with a settled problem. All right. So Jennifer says more. You need more diversity for wicked problems. You do. You absolutely need more diversity for wicked problems. More perspective diversity for wicked problems. Is diversity a settled problem? No, diversity is a wicked problem. It's complex. That's the thinking within the thinking within the thinking. So support a culture of curiosity where it's safe to share perspectives, ask questions, and challenge assumptions. So if you say you can never, Chris Rock, make a joke about someone who has a physical ailment that they can't control, then that is assuming a settled problem. You cannot roast someone who is suffering from something that is not within their control in any context. You cannot do that. That's a settled problem. Well, I'd argue it's not a settled problem. A roast is a roast. I would even argue that problems within our control is not a settled problem. If you found out that, I've been taking, the fact that I have brittle bones is because I have been not exercising enough. Okay, well, is it in my control or not in my control? So when you think about a settled problem like that, like this is a racial issue, or this is an ailment issue, and you cannot make jokes about this, or someone should always stand up and physically or verbally support someone who has been teased about, or a joke has been made. These are not settled problems. These are wicked problems. You go on Twitter and everyone thinks these are settled problems. These are wicked problems, and they're fun to grapple with. And they're fun to really think about in the how to think context of whether they're a wicked problem or a settled problem, wicked problem, or whether you're addressing it from the outside, from a viewpoint, looking at viewpoint or looking at perspective. And perspective is all kinds of things that we don't see when we see where you're from. So Jennifer says, perpetuating generational trauma. I'm not exactly sure the context of that, but could be an interesting part of conversation. I feel that living in diversity is what makes us strong in mind, a school where everywhere heterogeneity is more precious than homogeneity. Yes, in some cases, yes. Thank you. So anyway, this is kind of a more free-flowing conversation because you can see that this is outside of just talking about a specific bias, but From a strategic decision-making standpoint, it's very important to think about whether you're talking about viewpoint or perspective diversity, and thinking about these as not interchangeable is super important. And then really identifying whether you're talking about a moral problem that you want to make a settled problem because it's religion, or it's something in you just think it's right. It's a foundation. It's a moral foundation. You think it's fair, or you think it's caring, or it's all of the moral foundations. You think that this is a settled problem because of a moral thing, versus it's a wicked problem. It's much more complex than that. I would argue that for good thinking, move a few things out of the settled into the wicked, because then you can really see, are you getting a diversity of perspective, or are you getting like-minded people who happen to come from different viewpoints but share a similar perspective? So these kinds of distinctions, wicked, settled, viewpoint, perspective diversity, I think they help us make sense of the world and get closer to the truth. And that's the whole idea of good thinking. So this is kind of a mushier conversation. I hope you get something out of it. You can share. If you come to this after the live stream, feel free to weigh in. Anyway, welcome. If you're new, hope to see you next week. If you're regular good thinker, I hope to see you next week on Good Thinking. We are here each Monday morning on LinkedIn Live, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And we are on YouTube Live. You can go to Becky Saltzman, subscribe, and hit that bell notification. And you can become part of the Good Thinking community, because that's really what this is. So have a great week.